Hi, this is the Philosophical Angle, and I'm your host, Chris Angle. The purpose of the Philosophical Angle is to discuss concepts in current media and analyze them and see what their definitions, if they're using their concepts properly. And with me is my co-host and discussant, Rick Samuelson. Rick is from out on the West Coast. He's a venture capitalist and a graduate of Yale and Wharton. Good to see you, Rick.
Thanks for having me.
This week, the concept we're going to discuss is the Pope's visit last week. And he did various types of stops. He went to Congress, and he went to visit with the president and the UN in Philadelphia, and that was the political stops. And on the religious side, he went to the Sisters of the Poor. Well, if you take a quick notice of what I just said, the preponderance of stops were political. And so we're going to debate those and discuss the amount of politics in the Pope's visit as opposed to religious. Well, if we take a look at the history of the Catholic Church, this should be no surprise. Predominantly, politics have pervaded the history of the Church throughout the ages, and this visit was no different. And from a little help from an article from Breitbart by Ben Shapiro, we're going to go through some of the stops and some of the visits that the Pope did. One was on September 23rd, on Wednesday. A five-year-old girl miraculously got through security to bring a letter to the Pope, which the girl had memorized. Obviously staged. That means that the Pope and his security, they were in on it. And the Daily Mail of the UK reports that this was organized by a Mexican political activist organization from Los Angeles. Well, the only thing I can say is good one, Pope. Way to go. But perhaps I couldn't help but feel that this is a little bit cheap for the representative of Christ here on earth. But be that as it may, let's go to the next stop. On the next stop, he went to did a speech in front of Congress, and the Pope said, and I am paraphrasing, "We Americans mistreated the American Indians, and so he, the Pope, hopes that we don't do that again to the illegal aliens pouring across the border." Well, seeing that the administration affords them with our welfare system and health care, I can't figure out why the Pope's complaining. Because I wonder how many immigrants he admitted to the Vatican recently. I mean, after all, the Vatican is a country, and he's complaining about our country. I suspect he's allowed none to come into the Vatican. And how many does Pope have in his home? And did he take any Muslim refugees recently pouring over the borders from into Italy from Libya, from North Africa? Well, I suspect he's not taken any. The Pope was also at the White House speaking with Obama. And we're gonna quote that. And he said, while speaking at the White House, quote, "Here in the United States, we cherish religious liberty." I'm not quite sure he's using the pronoun we, but be that as it may. Here, I'll repeat this again. Here in the United States, we cherish religious liberty. The United States stands with you in defense of religious freedom and... Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say the Pope said this? This is President Obama speaking. The United States stands with you in defense of religious freedom and interfaith dialogue, knowing that people everywhere must be able to live out their faith free from fear and intimidation. Well, I would think you'd want to say something about that, because the Obamacare is bulldozing the Catholic churches and the universities viciously over abortion, and the administration prosecutes those who stand up to same-sex marriage, and the Pope says nothing. What a shame! I mean, he's got a great opportunity to make a political stance, and he doesn't. Right before Obama says all these talks about religious freedom, which doesn't seem to be what he's doing in action. Before Congress, the Pope lectures on the need to redistribute wealth to the poor of the world, and he says that governments must guarantee, and here I'll quote, lodging, labor, and land to the poor. Well, as far as wealthy are concerned, how about the Pope and he flying around? Doesn't he have a private jet or something like that? And what about the wealth of the Catholic Church in itself? Probably one of the wealthiest individual entities in the world. Certainly one of the biggest landowners in the world. If you take out, say, some of the governments, the Catholic Church as a private institute probably is one of the largest single landholders in the world. You know, and if you go into any town in Europe, and big or small, and you go to the center of the town, what dwarfs the entire area? Well, it's the Catholic Church. Even in small towns throughout Europe, you go to the center of the town, the most beautiful, old, wonderfully magnificent buildings. They're the old churches of the Catholic Church. They've been there for 300, 400, 500 years. And so where does this money come from? Well, it comes from the individuals who worked the fields and really serfs, who paid their money to the landowners, to the wealthy, who paid their money to the kings, who gave it to the Catholic Church. Okay. So let's go to the next one. And, oh yes, when he was with Obama, the Pope said nothing about abortion. He just talked about the death penalty. I mean, what's more important to the Pope and to the Catholic Church and its institutions? And his speech before Congress, and with the Supreme Court sitting there right in front of him, he said nothing about what the Catholic Church and all the fundamental churches throughout the world hold as fundamental issues, such as same-sex marriage, abortion, religious freedom, personal freedom. These are all great issues of churches, and nary a word. What a chicken. Of course, the Catholic Church has always been acquiescent to the political rulers throughout the world, and in league with government, and that's how it made its money. Nothing like being the epitome of crony capitalism is the Catholic Church. Well, stay the course, Pope Francis. Nothing new here. So I guess I'm a little bit concerned that the Catholic Church has perhaps a bit of hypocrisy here in these speeches that their leader has made over the last couple of weeks. But I'm going to turn it over to you, Rick. What are your comments about the Pope and his visits?
Well, I suppose the Pope is entitled to say anything he wants, essentially. I agree with you that there were tremendous missed opportunities to speak to issues that are far more embedded in the theological teachings of Christ and in the Bible than were raised by the Pope. I mean, to speak of the climate change and not to mention anything about the horrific events surrounding Planned Parenthood just seems to me to be a stretch. It's very difficult. I'm not a Catholic, but I'm certainly Christian. There's no debate anywhere in the scriptures that speaks to climate change, even obliquely. And his notion that governments should be responsible for redistributing wealth, to my mind, actually potentially robs Christians of free will, namely the choice to give to the poor, to help one's fellow man, and instead to have that important duty intermediated by a faceless, oftentimes soulless government that is one step removed from the act of giving. So it's not the same as an individual giving alms to the poor. It's one step removed, and in a sense, socializes the responsibility for that Christian act. So I'm, generally speaking, opposed on those kinds of moral grounds to having the government intermediate in any act of goodwill where private entities and private persons can perform functions of the ability to show one's fellow man that one is doing good.
Okay, now, should he have taken the opportunity, I think we agreed to bring up some of the issues that the Catholic Church or really any church are for, whereas the government has been against. Is it a problem of courage? Why do you suppose he didn't take this opportunity to bring up the religious issues, at least? Obviously, there are the questions of whether he's politically or economically a Marxist, and we can leave that aside for a moment. But at least on the religious side, why wouldn't he have brought up the issues and brought it more to the forefront of his speeches? Why do you suppose?
Well, it seems to me, and I'm expert to me, that he is moving the church in a more liberal direction, and one that aligns itself with socialist policies in Europe and as well, under the assumption that by aligning himself with what appear to be increasingly dominant approaches to he's marketing the church. And the argument, obviously, is that the church can't put that. The church should stand athwart the vagaries of current public opinion and governmental philosophy and so forth, and stick to its time-honored principles of thousands of years. So that's the debate, and where he comes out, it seems pretty clearly on the side of moving the church closer and closer to a secular understanding of how our society should be governed.
Well, it certainly seems that you're correct, but I can't imagine the church changing its stance on abortion. So, do you think that topic also it can be liberalized?
Well, wasn't he quoted as saying that there has to be more tolerance? I don't think he came out and endorsed abortion, but wasn't he speaking to more tolerance for widespread practices, particularly divorce and by implication abortion? I think what's striking is he didn't come out and condemn a very recent event, namely the ongoing scandal at Planned Parenthood, where babies' organs are being harvested. I mean, that is such an egregious violation. You'd think he would have focused on that rather than something else.
And yet not.
Right.
Well, I'd have to bring up my theory about it, is which the Catholic Church has always been acquiescent to the needs of the political leaders, and that's how it's made its money and its huge amount of wealth throughout history. And so this is really just a further example of the Catholic Church being one with the political establishment. I believe in days of old they sold forgiveness to the political leaders for cash. Well, I shouldn't say cash, but probably gold or something of material value. And that's how it created most of its wealth. Do you think it's just a matter of history behind pushing him along, as it's looking back for the last 800 years of historical precedents by the Catholic Church, just being an inertia and rolling him through the being one with the political establishment?
Well, I don't think I'd quite put him in the category of the earliest popes, who were more accomplished politicians than they were men of theology, and who had numerous mistresses and castles here and yon and so forth. He seems to be genuinely a man of compassion, and I think that should be recognized, and I think that has inspired people. And on the whole, that's a good thing. That he is conflating, socialist governmental philosophy with church teachings is alarming in this day and age, when we've seen so many failures on the part of socialist communist governments. And so many horrors as well, particularly with communist governments. And so not to take note of that, even as he urges to spread more wealth, is obviously not a fair assessment on his part.
I see. Delicately put, thank you. Hey, let's just step up to a side issue here. Well, it's not really a side issue, but the same-sex marriage question. Is it a fundamental right that two guys can get married? Or two women?
Well, stated so in the Constitution.
It's what?
It's not stated as such in the Constitution.
Right. Okay. But neither is any marriage. So.
Well, that's right. That's why it's left to the states to decide.
Okay. So let's take. So I see. So the point is here: the states should decide whether marriage um, should be only with um, man and woman, or same-sex marriage should be allowed. And so it's not really a. So the federal government intervening is going beyond its bounds. Is that's your statement?
Well, yes. I mean, and Judge Roberts as much as said so. I mean, this is completely new. For a couple hundred years, it's never been an issue. The federal government has never needed. The Supreme Court has never needed to intervene on this issue, and it was just always assumed that the states would decide what the scope of marriage would be, and that seemed to have worked for a long, long time with no problem. And now the Supreme Court has intervened, and that model's changed.
Right, it has. And so that's why I want to bring it up here to discuss. Although it's not in the Constitution, they feel it's probably within one of the amendments and the due process of the law, that it's a fundamental right along with marriage. In other words, if a man and a woman can marry, so can a man and a man, or a woman with a woman. But is that a logical jump? Because the word marriage is supposes the word marriage evolved from the idea of a heterosexual marriage, a heterosexual idea to procreate children. The word marriage in no way can be used for in a homosexual sense. And thus it's a logical leap to assume that if a man and a woman can get married, a homosexual marriage can also have the marriage right included. So I disagree with them. What do you think? Any thoughts? Rick, are you with us?
You seem to be breaking up.
Oh, okay.
Chris.
Oh, okay. So you didn't hear my little question and speech?
Yes. Sorry, I didn't catch that last statement.
Well, it's no need anyway, because we're just about out of time. So we're gonna stop the program here, and we'll see you all next week on the Philosophical Angle. Thank you.